Hey everybody, Jordan Libel with Pianote here. This lesson is on 5 mistakes that beginner piano players tend to make. These are 5 things that we all have to avoid. Some of them seem obvious, some of them might surprise you, so let's get in here. The first mistake a lot of new players tend to do is they play with flat fingers. They just kind of lay their hands out with sort of flat palms on the keyboard, and they might be, they're playing a C major scale, and they just kind of flop up and down. The reason why that is bad for new players is you run the risk of creating some injury or strain or pulling a muscle or a tendon in your hands. But you also have way less expressive ability when you're playing with flat fingers. You just you're way less accurate, you're way less musical, you just have less control in general. So what you should do if you find yourself playing with flat fingers is actually curl your hands up so that you're playing on the balls of your fingertips. And that's going to give you way more power. You'll even feel as you take your hands from flat to curved, you'll feel your forearms kind of activating. And that's a big plus for a piano player. You want to have your power coming from your forearms when you're playing. So with your fingers nice and rounded, you have way more expressive ability. You can play loud and soft. You can play accurately. You're not going to be like catching yourself up on any of the black keys or anything like that. So make sure not to play with flat fingers. It might seem tempting at first, but trust me, build that rounded tip style of playing and you'll be laughing in no time. All right, so the second mistake that piano players make is practicing their exercises too fast, especially when you're just starting out. I know some of these exercises, some of these scales or chord inversions or something that you want to do, they're boring and they're hard to get through. And a lot of times you think to yourself, I've got this. I know how to play a C major scale. I'm ready to just race that up and down the keyboard. But the thing is especially when you're just starting out, you're not just building muscle strength and accuracy. You're also building muscle memory, and you're sort of learning the motions needed just in your sort of subconscious to play your piano as fluidly as possible. And that skill set only gets built when you're taking things nice and slow. So even though it might seem painfully slow at times to take your exercises at 60 beats per minute and you're just crawling along, you'll get to a point where you're really, really solid in your technique, and then you can start exploring all your exercises and songs at faster tempos. Trust me, it's the best way to go about doing it. You need that solid foundation in order to get to that place where you want to play nice and fast. The next problem that a lot of early piano players bump into is practicing without a metronome. This is another one where you think to yourself, I know the timing, I know when I'm playing on time, but you're missing out when you're not practicing with a metronome. It might seem really obvious, but using a metronome keeps you nice and accountable for the rhythm. It also helps you to understand what rhythmic feel is. And rhythmic feel is just, it's almost like an internal feeling of the beat. And without actually having a steady beat to play with, you're never going to develop this rhythmic feel, and you're going to tend to either rush, which is playing too fast, or you're going to tend to drag, which is playing too slow. And maybe someday you have ambitions of wanting to play with a drummer or wanting to play with other musicians, and if you're not practicing with a metronome right from the get-go, you'll run into problems when you're wanting to work with other musicians and we're all trying to sync up on the proper tempo. So even though it might seem kind of boring or too restricting, just take out the metronome and make sure that you're playing all your early exercises to a click track. Another mistake early piano players make is bad posture. Now, I think we've all been guilty of this. We all tend to slouch from time to time. Sometimes we get focused on a piece of music or an exercise and we forget that we're actually sitting at the piano, and so we kind of hunch over or we're distracted and we play, with ourselves all twisted. But just remember that you want to have reasonably straight posture as far as your back and shoulders nice and loose and down. And the reason why that is because you're actually meant to play the piano taking a lot of your power from your forearm. It comes as a surprise to some, but we don't really get a lot of our power from our fingers as a piano player. We play from the forearm. You can actually feel it if you're sitting at the piano nice and straight. So I'm just going to play a C major scale here. And notice how my forearm is level with the keyboard and parallel with the keys. And I'm keeping my fingers nice and round. And I can feel some muscles working underneath my forearm. And not only that, but I'm also making sure to keep my shoulders nice and relaxed. And all that stuff just helps keep you loosened up so that you can play musically, so that you can express yourself with louds and softs and different, changes in tempo. All that stuff becomes a lot easier when you are keeping yourself reasonably well postured at the piano. And then the final mistake a lot of piano players make when they're first starting out is simply forcing a practice. I know practice is one of those kind of balancing acts between discipline and inspiration, but never get to the point where you're just becoming frustrated or you feel like you've got a ton of stuff to practice and you've only got so much time, so you got to rush through it all, or you're becoming frustrated. Just be sure to hold yourself accountable for your own practice. I know sometimes we want to just blaze through something, or we get to something really simple and we think that we're already better than this exercise, so we can kind of skip over it or rush through it. But just remember that you're building a lot of things through consistent, dedicated repetition. That's really what practice is at the early point. It seems like homework, it seems kind of dull, and obviously always make sure that you're having fun, but make sure that you're practicing well each time you sit down, and if you're not feeling it, simply take a break and walk away. All right, so that's a couple mistakes that early piano players tend to make. Look out for them in your own practice when you sit down at the piano. If you have any other things that you want to learn about the piano, check out pianote.com. We've got so much more to teach you, and sign up and we'll see you there.